Chapter 13. How Don Gaylor fought the giant of the Rock of Galtres and conquered him. The news went back to the giant, and presently he came out on horseback, and he appeared so huge upon the horse that not a man in the world would dare look at him. He had on plates of iron so long that they covered him from throat to the saddle, and a large bright helmet, and an iron mace in his hand. Greatly afraid were the squires and damsels to behold him. And Gaylor was not so hardy but that then he had great fear. But the nearer it came, the less he feared. Wretch, said the giant, who sent thee that shall never see thee again? Look and see how a mace is used. And he came on like a tower. Devil, quoth Gaylor, thou shalt be conquered and killed with what I bring on my side, which is God and the right. And he ran at him so fiercely that his lance broke, and the giant lost one of his stirrups. He on his part had lifted up his mace to strike Gaylor on the head, but the knight passed so rapidly that it only struck the rim of his shield and burst all the arms and neck fastenings, so that it fell, and Gaylor had well nigh fallen also. This did not break the blow, nor could the giant recover the mace, which came upon the head of his own horse and smote him down, so that he himself fell. Gaylor twice rode over the giant before he could rise, but then his own horse stumbled over the giant's, and he fell on the other side. The knight, seeing himself in the chance of death, rose presently and drew the sword which Urganda had given him, and met the giant, who had now taken his mace from the ground and struck it on the wooden stock that he had severed it. But with the piece that was left, the giant gave him such a blow on the helmet as made him set one hand to the ground, and twisted the helmet on his head. But he who was nimble and good of heart rose presently, and turned to the giant, and avoided his next blow, and gave a stroke at him with so full force that it cut away the arm clean from the shoulder, and passing down wounded him in the leg. The giant roared aloud, Ah, wretch, I am destroyed by one man? And he caught at Gaylor, but his wounded limb failed him, and he sate down, and with his remaining hand sought to seize the knight. But Gaylor cut that hand through, and sprung upon him, for in outreaching he had fallen along, and smote off his head. The squires and damsels then came up, and Gaylor sent the squires with the head to Gandallac. With that there came through the gate 10 knights chained together, who bade him come and take possession of the castle, seeing that he had slain the giant and delivered them. What think thou, damsel? said Gaylor. Shall we sojourn here tonight? They assented thereto, and he freed the knights from their chains. And so went they all into the castle, where were many goodly houses, and there they feasted and refreshed themselves. The next day the people of the land came to do him homage, but he took their homage for Gandallac, of whom of right it belonged, and right joyful were they, hearing that their natural lord should return, for they had long been hardly ruled, and like foreign subjects. This done, Gaylor and the damsels, and one squire who continued with him, took the way to the hermitage, and there the knight received the good man's blessings. The one damsel then said she would pursue her journey to King Lusart's court, whither she was going to see a knight, her brother. Damsel, then said Gaylor, if you see there a knight bearing 2 lions in his shield, say the child of whom he made knight commends himself to him, and that I shall strive to be a good man, and that if we meet I shall tell him more concerning both me and himself than he yet knows. And when she was gone, Gaylor asked the other who the lady was that sent her to see the battle. If thou wouldst know that, said she, follow me, and in 5 days you shall see. That thou shalt not let me, quoth he, for they went on together. At length they came to a forked way, and Gaylor, who rode before, thought the damsel followed him, but she had taken the other. This was at the entrance of the forest called Brananda, which separates the countries Clara and Gresca. It was not long before he heard a voice cry, Help me, help me! He turned, and the squire said that he thought it was the damsel who had left them. How? Left us? I have badly looked to her. quoth he, and he took his shield and lance and galloped towards the sound. Hard at hand he espied 6 villains, armed with morions and battle-axes, and a hideous dwarf on horseback, who cruelly laid on the damsel with a staff. Thou wicked and ugly thing, quoth the knight, God send thee bad luck, and passing the lance to his left hand, he seized the staff, and therewith smote him to the ground and stunned him. The villains then attacked him on all sides, but to the first he gave such a greeting with his staff that he lay sprangled on the earth. Another, who had fixed his battle-axe in his shield, could not pluck it out again. He smote through with the lance, and left the lance, and made at the others with a battle-axe he had plucked from his own shield. But they durst not now abide him, and fled into the thick underwood, where he could not follow. By this the dwarf had again got on horseback, and calling out to Gaylor, "In an evil hour hast thou killed my men," he galloped away. Then Gaylor drew his lance from the body of the villains, and saw that it was sound, which pleased him, and he gave his arms to the squire, and said, "Damsel, go you before me, and I will guard you better than I have before." So took they again the way they had left, and it soon brought them to the river Bran, which could not be passed without a boat. Now rode the damsel somewhat far before Gaylor, and finding the boat ready, she crossed before him. While she waited for the boat's return, the dwarf crossed before him. While he waited for the boat's return, the dwarf came and cried, "By my faith, Sir traitor, thou shalt die, and leave the damsel." And Gaylor saw that there came with him 3 knights well armed and mounted. "What?" quoth one. "Shall we all agree to set upon a single enemy? I want no help." And he ran with a full course against Gaylor, who was ready to entertain him. They encountered in such sort. The knight pierced Gaylor's armor, making him feel the naked point of his lance. And Gaylor bade him bravely welcome, and cast him from the saddle. Thereat the other twain, admiring, ran both against him, the one failing and the other breaking his lance. Gaylor smote off the helmet of the one. The other turned and struck at his breast and broke his lance. But though Gaylor felt the blow sorely, it wounded him not. Then they all laid hand to sword and began battle, the dwarf crying out, "Kill his horse, that he may not escape." Gaylor aimed a blow at him who he had unhelmed. He raised up his shield, and the sword cut through the rim of the shield, and the point came on his head and cleaved it to the jaws. And when the other knight saw that stroke, he turned his horse and away. Gaylor followed and made a blow at him, which fell short upon the saddle, and cut away at many plates of his armor. And then he, in fear, spurred his horse and threw his shield from his neck, and galloped so fast that Gaylor would follow him no longer. Gaylor would then have caught the dwarf to have him tied by the leg, but that little wretch had ridden off betimes. Hereupon he came to the first whom he had dismounted, who had somewhat recovered. "I am more sorry for you, Sir Knight," said he, "than for your comrades, for you attacked me in knightly guise, though I know not whereof." "It is true," replied he, but that the dwarf told us that you had beaten him and slain his men, and taken from him a damsel against her will." Gaylor then showed him the damsel waiting for him on the other side of the river. "You see her," said he, "and if she were with me against her will, she would not wait there." And then, relating how the truth was, he gave the knight his horse, and bidding him torment the dwarf for his villainy, he took leave of him. Then Gaylor crossed at the ferry, and proceeded under the damsel's guidance. Between dawns and vespers she showed him a fair castle that stood above a valley, and said to him, "There we shall go to rest." And there they were well received, it being the dwelling of the damsel's mother, whom she bade honor her guest as the best knight that ever hung his shield from his neck. Then she said to Gaylor, "Good knight, you must wait a while for me here, that I may perform what I have promised. I shall soon return." So she went, and without long tarrying returned, and told him to mount and come with her. "In God's name," quoth he, and he took his arms and mounted and followed her. They rode through a forest, and when the night was advanced, came to a city called Grandairs, and at the castle the damsel told him to alight and follow her, and there she would tell him what she had promised. Shall I take my arms? Said he. Yes, she replied, for a man knows not what may happen to him. He followed her to a wall. She told him to get over, and she would go round and meet him. Gaylor with some difficulty got up, by reason of his arms, and let himself carefully down into a garden, where presently the damsel came, and another with her. Sir knight, said she, before you enter you must tell me whose son you are. Let that alone, quoth Gaylor, for I am of such parents that till I am of more renown I dare not name them. You must tell me, and it shall not be to your harm. Know then, I am son to King Perion and Queen Elsina, and I could not have told you that 7 days past. Come in, said the damsel then, and having entered they disarmed him, and threw a mantle over him. The one went before, and the other behind him, and so they passed through the palace, where were many dames and damsels in bed. And when any one asked who was there, the two damsels answered. Thus they went on till they came into a chamber, and there Gaylor saw a beautiful damsel on a rich bed, combing her goodly locks. And when she saw him, she put a fair garland on her head, and went to him. You are very welcome, sir, being the best knight that I know. And you, lady, are very well founded, being the fairest lady I ever saw. Then said the damsel who guided him, Here, sir, is my mistress, and I have fulfilled my promise. Her name is Aldevia, the daughter of the king of Sorolus, and she has been brought up here by her aunt, the wife to the Duke of Bristol. Then turning to her lady, I give to you the son of King Perion of Gaul. You are both children of kings, and both fair persons. If ye should love each other, no one can blame ye. And with that the damsels left together, and nothing more shall be here related for these and such like things, which are neither comfortable to a good conscience nor virtue. Man ought in reason lightly to pass over, holding them in as little estimation as they deserve. The hour being come from when it behooved him to depart, the damsels conducted him to the place where overnight he had left his arms, and being armed he went again into the garden, and there found the dwarf, who cried out, In an ill hour dost thou enter here, for thou shalt die, and the wretch that led thee here. And then he called out aloud, Come out, knights, come out, for here is a man come out of the Duke's chamber. Gaylor lightly got over the wall, and mounted his horse, but the dwarf and his people speedily came upon him, and when Gaylor saw himself so beset, he said within himself, Let me die if I be not revenged upon that villainous dwarf. But he kept behind his horse, and the rest compassed the knight on all sides. Gaylor laid manfully about him, and slew two before he broke his lance, then fell upon them with his sword, and made them so soundly acquitted with its sharp edge, that he thought himself the hardiest and was glad to give way, but before he could cut his road through, they killed his horse, and when the dwarf saw him on foot, he attempted to ride over him. Gaylor stepped aside and caught his bridle, and gave him such a blow on the breast with his sword hilt that he fell off, and the blood gushed out of his ears and nose. Then he leapt upon his horse, but in springing up he dropped the reins, and the horse rode off some distance before he could recover them. He would then have turned back to revenge himself, but he saw his lady shaking a handkerchief from a tower window in token that he should depart, and so he rode into the forest. There were some of the opinion that they should follow him, but others said it was vain in seeing that he had gotten into the wood, and they were all astonished at what they had done. The dwarf, now recovered, cried out, Carry me to the Duke, and I will tell him on whom to take vengeance. They took him in their arms, and he told the Duke how he found the damsel in the forest, and wished to bring her back, and all that had followed. The Duke then asked him if he knew the damsel, which was she, and all the damsels in the palace were called before him. As soon as the dwarf beheld her, he said, This is she by whom your palace is dishonored. Ah, traitor, quoth she, you were beating me in the forest, and that good knight defended me. But the Duke was greatly incensed, and said he would force her to confess the truth, and he put her in prison. Yet neither evils nor torments made her discover anything, and there she remained in prison to the great grief of Aldevia, who dearly loved her, and knew not by whom to send tidings to her friend Gaylor.